Yeah, so this is our new Stigmata. The Stigmata is reborn in its carbon form. The original Stigmata was aluminum, and it was a great bike by all accounts. People loved it. We got a lot of good feedback on it, but it came out in a time when cyclocross was really transitioning from aluminum to carbon. And so there was kind of two camps of people in the cyclocross world. You had folks that were looking for a high-end carbon race bike, and then you had people that wanted just something utilitarian. So we found that people were kind of either going steel, hand-built, twirly mustache route, or they were going like full-on high-end race bike carbon. And aluminum was kind of left in the middle, and it sort of worked its way down to like the economy entry-level bike. And we're not like, we want to make awesome race bikes that are at the top of engineering and at the top of the game. And so it kind of just slowly faded away. I came to Santa Cruz about 4 years ago from Seattle, where I was a mountain biker, cyclocross racer, road racer, and I was always kind of wondering, hoping, had my fingers crossed that we might make another Stigmata. And finally one day I got word like, hey, let's work on a new Stigmata. And I was just like, finally like, yes, I can wear Lycra and not be shamed. So we started working on it, and I think for us the starting point really was making a bike that was a cyclocross bike. And we started with just a pretty, I would say, started with a classic cyclocross geometry, but like the new version of what is now a classic cyclocross geometry. So a lot of the older cyclocross bikes had really high BBs. I think that's a legacy from when people were riding with toe clips. So, you would see these ridiculously high BBs because when your toe clips were flipped upside down, when you were remounting, they would drag on the ground. So, BB drops in the like 50 to 55 range. But over the years, they got lower and lower and lower because you don't really need as much clearance, but the corner way better. So we went with a 69 millimeter bottom bracket drop, and that just helped give it like an aggressive, racy feel, but still corners well. And I think that's where people start to look at the versatility and say, yeah, you can ride it on the road. And it's like, well, yeah, it's got the same bottom bracket drop as a road bike. So, it's going to corner in a similar fashion. You go from your road race bike to this bike, and you take it out on the road, it's going to feel similar. You're not going to feel like you're shooting out of the apex of a turn. Some of the other new features of the bike, obviously it's carbon, as I mentioned. We have full internal cable routing, which allows for Di2 compatibility, keeps a nice clean look. You don't have mud gumming up all your cables and housing and all that. Because of the disc brakes, which was an obvious thing at this point, disc brakes a couple years ago, even a year and a half ago, were good, but you were left with one model of disc brake basically from all the manufacturers. Shimano made a cable actuated disc brake, SRAM made a cable actuated disc brake. There was a few, TRP had a few cable actuated hydro hybrids, and I think everyone was just kind of like waiting, when is this road hydraulic disc brake going to come out? And so that kind of dovetailed nicely into all those products hitting the market right with this coming out, and it was just an obvious choice. If you haven't ridden a road bike or a cyclocross bike with hydraulic disc brakes, it's a completely different experience. If you've ridden one with cable disc brakes, it's a completely different experience. It's not so much stopping fast. You always hear the detractors, the Luddites of the world saying, oh, I can stop just as fast with my cannies. And it's like, well, yeah, I could probably launch myself over the handlebars on any bike with any set of brakes, but it's about how much force it takes to stop. And when you're in an hour-long race, anything you can do to save energy and keep yourself from getting fatigued is a bonus. It's like those are watts. You're using up force to slow down. So it's just predictable, and it's predictable in all conditions. In the wet, in the dry, it's the same braking, and that's huge. You don't have to constantly readjust what you're doing for the conditions. You just hit the brakes and you stop. So because of the disc brakes, we were able to clean up more of the frame. You no longer have to have a cantilever or a brake boss for your brake cable and canny bosses and reinforcements, because traditionally when you had cannies, your brake's pushing your seat stay that way. And when you move the brake down to the chainstay, you don't have to worry about that anymore. And because of that, it opens up a lot of space. And that's why we're able to fit 41s in there. So that segues into the whole gravel. Is it a gravel bike? Is it a disc brake road bike? Whatever. And it's like, yes, you can put 41s on this. Yes, you can ride on gravel on this. You can ride on dirt. You can ride on whatever you want to call it. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, we went for a ride, and part of the ride was on gravel. And I wouldn't go so far as to say we were gravel grinding, but I was on a cyclocross bike and I was on gravel. So call it what you want, but through and through, it's a cyclocross bike. We start any project with kind of all of it on the table, you know, and it's like, and then we just start removing things and kind of honing it down. I mean, the through axles were sort of an obvious step for us. I mean, we did it for all of our mountain bikes. We spent all this time and research into developing that and integrating into our carbon technology and processes, and the benefits were obvious. And so that was just a logical next step. I mean, as far as wheel swaps are concerned, I would say that in a lot of ways, it's just as fast if you have another set of through axle wheels. The fender mount question is another one, and we really wanted it to be a cyclocross bike, and the second you add fender mounts, it's like now it's a commuter, and then it opens up a whole other set of questions. Well, if it's a commuter, why isn't there X, Y, and Z? And then you add X, Y, and Z, and they're like, well, is it a gravel grinder? Then no matter what you do, people are going to say, well, why doesn't it have this? Why doesn't it have that? So we just said, let's focus on, you know, a cyclocross bike. You can put bigger tires on it if you want. I've run it with 41s, and it's been a lot of fun. I like it with the 33s just because it's, you know, a little more traditional and does still feel a little zippier. So there's a clear delineation between this and our other products. So that being said, we could kind of try out some different things. And because it's a drop bar bike and the drivetrains that are offered, there's a lot more versatility with having a press fit bottom bracket. And you know, it's almost become standard for road and cyclocross bikes, and you know, through our testing we haven't had any problems. It gives us a nice wide cross section in the design process. So coming down into the BB, we're able to bring the down tube out further, basically to flush with the outside of where the bearings would be on a threaded BB. Just gives us more space to work with, allows us to create a thinner tube section that has the same amount of strength, and it's just like a cleaner, easier way to address some of the internal cable routing aspects of the bike as it relates to the road and cyclocross setup. I think in some permutation, I mean, the Nomad was a really good example of how you can integrate some amount of internal cable routing to clean it up and to make things simpler, but without like compromising other aspects of the bike. So you might see similar executions of internal cable routing to the Nomad and to the way the brake is run on this bike. You know, when it comes to addressing like Di2 and electronic, we're starting to see things go wireless with some of that sneak peek stuff of SRAM. I mean, maybe in a not too distant future we won't even need cables, I don't know. But I think that the main part of what we learned was the internal, the tubes that are molded into the carbon, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there for having something that is easy to use, simple to run, and without making something that's a complete burden for bike shops and mechanics and end users. And one of the things we did with this bike is that it's got the internal tube for the brake, and we use the connect-a-jig, so you actually can just run it through and it doesn't even require a bleed. So it's internal, but it's really not that much harder than zip tying it to your frame and going that route. Yeah, I mean, I guess co-developed is we basically designed the bike and the fork as a one big unit. So I think the reason we wanted to make that point was so that people knew that it was like you were getting the quality Santa Cruz product and engineering throughout the entire package, not something that was an off-the-shelf fork that we then added on the bike. I mean, we designed everything on there from the ground up, including the fork, and that's kind of what led to the drop-in headset, which, if you look, I don't have a fork with me, but if you look at the fork, it goes from the legs up into the crown where it connects to the steer tube. The crown race is actually built into the carbon, and what that allows you to do is come down from the steer tube into the top of the fork with a 45-degree angle, and so you're able to get like an incredible amount of stiffness and strength there with, and then effectively removing material in other spots.